All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Megan. I'm so glad you're here with us today. Today we have a wonderful acrylic inspired this inspiration is watercolors today, but if you'd like to use acrylics, you absolutely can. We are doing watercolor poppies. In all of my classes, if you're new here, I always encourage you to join whatever mediums you have. So if you don't happen to have watercolors, I encourage you to join with using acrylics, colored pencils, anything you like. But if you're new here, my name is Megan. We are going to be painting poppies today, and this is a great class for beginners of all ages and all skill levels. So I'll go over a list of the supplies and they'll jump right in to get started. Today I have an array of paintbrushes, kind of small, medium, and large for our class. This will allow us to play with wider shapes and then some smaller detailed areas with some of these smaller brushes. In addition, I do have a pencil. It is your decision or option if you wanted to use a pencil or not. If you use a pencil, do a very soft line. This may help with some of your compositional form. If you don't have practice with flower shapes or flower edges, doing a soft pencil sketch could help you. But just keep in mind that you can see pencil lines through watercolors. So if you do a pencil line, I encourage you to do a soft pencil, okay? So I have brushes, I have a pencil, I have a 9 by 12 watercolor paper, and I have an array of colors. Now for poppies, it's pinks and reds, and you can kind of mix and play with the colors that you like. If you happen to have a palette at home, you could always use a palette to mix colors on. So you'll need something to mix colors on. It's really important, but we're going to be painting poppies today. And I do have a small cup of water to rinse our brushes. I always have a paper towel as well, handy for our classes to clean up as we need to. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. Again, my name is Megan. I hope you all are having a great day. If you're new here, be sure to like this video, say hello. There are lots of details on our Patreon page on how to stay connected with us and join our creative art classes. But I'm so glad you're here with us today. I'll do a little bit of light sketching. I'll zoom down so you can see some of the sketching. Now, if you're comfortable doing um, flower designs and flower shapes, you may not need to do sketching, but I'm going to zoom in so you can see some of this. So based on our composition, there is one full flower here with several different petals. And then this one is kind of a half flower shape. And then this was an upward petal shape. So we could even start with just doing some basic outlining on where we want our flowers to be. Now, one thing to do to get started is if you wanted to freehand this, we could freehand it. I may do just a little bit of a simple flower sketch. Maybe I'll do the one up here first, where I want this top flower to be. Maybe it's here. And you can just do a rounded petal. Now I'm just going to sketch one rounded petal, and then you can kind of layer another one in it. Now, if you want to just freehand this, you can absolutely just freehand this with and I'll bring this a little closer. This is just an example of just playing with different shapes that you can try to follow when you paint. We all know our different levels of confidence. This one's going to be an upward flower. We know our levels of confidence with like flower shapes and different angles. So this is a great way. Look at that. I just did a couple of overlapping petals. It's a smaller flower head and it's kind of bending one way. And then I can use my soft shaping here to add color with my watercolors. Kind of looks like a butterfly, doesn't it? It's kind of cute. So once I have that basic shape in, I can bring down a little bit of a stem just to show you. So if I just take this shape here and I give it a little bit of a long stem, I'm just going to bring that down to the bottom of the page just to show you. Okay. If you want to do the same thing with these other flowers, you can, but let's do this first step first. We'll do things a couple different ways. Maybe we'll paint this one in first, and then we'll do some experiments with the other ones. Okay. So I just did a soft outline here of that flower and those petals. For our next step, let's go ahead and mix a color that we like. So this is going to be a pinky reddish color, and we can go ahead and mix that. So I'm going to bring a little bit of water onto my palette. So just water right here to get it ready. So 2 or 3 dollops of water. And then I have a wet brush. I can go to my palette and find a color, or you're going to mix a color that you like. So I'm going to grab some of this ink from my brush and start to mix a color that is a cute poppy color. And that's a nice soft red. It's actually a great poppy color. The more water you add to this, the softer it will be. And you want these first petals to be fairly light in color. So I'm going to do a little bit of an experiment. We want the edges of these petals to be nice and soft. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to do a nice soft light petal. And I want the bottom area of the petal to be a little darker. So that we can do with an additional layer of watercolors. But I'm going to come in, I'm going to fill in each of these petals with a nice soft layer of pink. I can see my pencil through. I'm doing this for kind of demonstration purposes. But you can come in and just do a soft layer of pink or red. You can always make your colors darker. With watercolor, you typically start with lighter colors and then you apply darker colors. I can easily bring in, look at that, with a little touch, I can easily bring in a little bit of the darker color towards the base here. See that? I'm just bringing in a little more pigment and it's already starting to flow. Isn't that beautiful? This is a watercolor poppy. So I did a light color to start. I'm going to do a light color here. And then you can add more pigment to the inner side. Now you can see my lines through, which is fine. This is all for, demonstration purposes. The next flower, I won't do any lines, any pencil lines. We'll just kind of freehand it. But if you ever wanted to sketch, you could sketch as much or as little as you wish. So you can see we did a soft pink first. And then if you want to make the bottom a little darker, you could mix another color. Maybe I'll just grab in a little bit of this darker red, and I'll mix a secondary color, and I can add a little bit more of that if I wanted to the inner side here. Look, I'm going to add a little bit more, and you can add as much or as little as you wish. Ooh, and I'm experimenting here. It's okay to experiment when you do art. It's actually a really fun part of the process. But I want all that dark area to be down here towards the bottom. So I'm just going to let that dry. See how it's nice and soft around the edges? With watercolor, you can kind of use your finger or the corner of a paper towel to kind of control and move your paint around. And lean back in your chair. If you like the way it looks, you can leave it. If you want to sponge up or soak up some of the paint to control where you see the dark and the lights, that's okay too. You can also use like a clean brush to kind of dab around the tip. So you can see how it's darker around the bottom edge and then it's lighter around the tips. That's exactly what I wanted. And with watercolor, you have to be really patient and let it dry. It's a very important part of the process. So I'm going to leave that first poppy right there. And if anybody's joining, we're painting these beautiful watercolor poppies today. So I'm not going to touch those. Part of watercolor is just being really patient and letting things dry. So I kind of have two colors here. I have this lighter pink and I have this darker one. That's perfect. I'm going to make a little bit more of this lighter color so I have it ready for my next step because we are going to do more poppies, base layer poppies. So if you want to have that lighter color pink and then a darker accent, you're welcome to do that. But we're going to do some of the bigger ones next. And we're going to do it in this top design here. So see this big design right here? This bigger poppy, we're going to do that one next. And you're going to do 4 simple poppy leaves. So you can kind of have a little bit, you can use the tip of your brush. You're going to have a round poppy leaf. And I'm doing a wet wet brush on a dry canvas. So there's one leaf right there. If you wanted to do wet on wet, you would just paint. We can try wet on wet for our next flower or even for our next one. You could just paint on wet first. And then I'm going to grab a little bit more and I'm just going to do a couple of other poppy style flowers right here nearby. I'm going to do a rounded one here. We'll do another one over here. We're just doing 4 leaves. We're going to add more poppy leaves in. There's going to be another one here. So I'm just having fun. I'm not being overly critical. Soft pink poppy, and you can add more water, but have fun and enjoy the process. I'm having a little bit of white spacing in between some of these petals. Filling these in nice and softly. We're going to add that dark pink color in next for that inner darker shade. And these can all gently touch here in the middle. Our goal is to keep the edge leaves of the poppies nice and light. Once you're ready, you can bring in a little bit of that darker poppy touch. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Look at that color spread. A darker color poppy touch on the inside and let that spread. I'm just doing gentle touches with a darker color of the red. And this is where watercolor can be really fun. You can control starting with those lighter pigments and touching in some of those darker colors. And you can also control how far it spreads. So if that darker color is spreading into the lighter color, you can always grab the corner of a paper towel and kind of blot up around the edges so the edge stays nice and light. So you can try that if you wish. See how I'm dabbing the edges to soften the edges of those poppies? For me, it's important to have the edge a little softer in color. Now I'm going to add a little bit more, and that's really fun. We're going to add another layer of flower on top, but I'm really managing the edges of these poppies. I want them to be a little lighter. And you can see how that one dried. It dried so beautifully. So just take your time. I am going to add a little more pigment, so a little bit more of this darker color pigment. You may need to mix a little bit more of a color to get a little bit more of that pigment in. See, I'm almost out of color, so I just need to go back to my palette and mix. Ooh, that's very red. So you can play with how red or how pink you want these poppies to be, right? And the more water, the softer this color will be. This is really going to make them pop. Watch this. This is that darker color. I'm just doing a touch of color and I'm going to let it spread because the color is still wet. So I'm just doing a tiny touch of ink down into the middle of the poppy and I'm going to let it spread on its own naturally. Isn't that beautiful? And you can help it flow or you can just let it be and just see what happens. You can see certain areas will pull up, certain areas will not. But with watercolors, we always start light to dark. We start with lighter colors and then we add our darker colors for those other instances. We're going to add, once this dries, we're going to add in, I'm just bringing in a little bit of a dark edge here just to be playful. Look at that. It's kind of fun. Okay. And if I don't like it, I can kind of slowly wipe it with my finger, or I can use the corner of a paper towel to kind of dab it a little bit. So it's absolutely up to you. I'm going to be patient and not touch that and let it dry. We're going to add some more layers of poppies on top of that, more layers of leaves to build out that poppy. So I'm going to be very patient and I encourage you to just acknowledge the patience of today's class. I'm not going to, if this bottom leaf is my last leaf, I can take my pencil And again, I'm just doing a soft sketch of where the stem may be, just so everybody can kind of see it all together. Of where my stem is. So there's my stem, but I'm going to let this dry and we're going to add another layer on top. Now I am going to erase part of this stem down here because we're going to do 3 poppies today. If you want to do more or less poppies, it's absolutely up to you, but I'm going to let that one dry. We're going to add more layering. And then I'm going to do one more down here. And we're going to do the same technique that we just did. Lighter poppy colors first. Lighter leaves first, and then we're going to bring in that darker color. So this is a lighter color leaf first. Let's see. And this one down here is going to be more open and kind of fluttery. So this is going to be a wide, open kind of style. And you can do some of those rounded leaf petals here. And you can do single petals or you can make them all connect. It's absolutely up to you. This is kind of like the backbone of the flower. I'm going to add a little more water because when I add more water, it's going to allow me to add more pigment in some places. And you can see in some areas I'm leaving a little bit of a space. That's just for me to hold space just in case I want it. And you can make your poppies as fluttery or as kind of closed as you wish. It's absolutely up to you. So this is a watery, soft pink, that soft pink edging, right? We talked about that. Play with applying this soft pink. So we're doing watercolor poppies today. I hope everyone's enjoying themselves. I'm keeping these nice and light. And then we're just going to slowly start to add a little bit of color down towards the bottom. You can do a touch and flow like we did there, like this. And make sure you have enough water on your flowers for it to flow. I am working on a table surface today, so it keeps everything nice and flat. If you want to drip in a little more water to kind of help your flow and the blending, you could do that. You can kind of guide the water and the pigment to go in certain areas. So be playful here. If you're not used to using watercolors, it's a beautiful thing because anything can happen really. And the more you play with watercolors, the more comfortable you're going to get with them. So again, I'm having a little bit more of that darker pigment down here towards the bottom. And I'm going to make it a little more bold. Ooh, that's like a hot pink. I don't want a hot pink. Let's see here. Let's see. I have lots of different colors. It's just about finding the colors you like to use first. There, that's a little bit better. And I'm letting the 2 other ones dry. With watercolor, you have to be a little patient. And I'm just tapping in a little bit of pigment. Now you can always move the pigment around. Like up here, it's getting a little too dark. So I'm going to shift some of that pigment down back towards the bottom. If the color doesn't go away when you shift it, and I'm going to take away some of these rounded areas, you can always dab it with your brush. Or sorry, with your paper towel. So I'll show you. That actually looks interesting with the water pooling there. I can decide if I want to keep that or not. It actually is pretty neat. So I might just lean into that like happy little watercolor situation. I might even add a little bit more pigment over here. This is like a little bit of like a hot pink. There's so many different colors of poppies. It's so cool. So you can just start to add in a little touch of darker colors wherever you want to. This is one of the fun elements. We will add another layer of color on top of this. But you can play, we're going to add another layer, but you could play with adding a little bit more if you wanted to. So I'm just being really playful. And if you don't like something, you can just move it around and wipe it up. But the goal is to try to have the edges be a little softer. And then we're adding more contrast down towards the bottom. So any way you want to get there, it's absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. So I'm going to let that dry. There's some really funky things happening. I'm going to try not to touch it, even though I am touching it. So you have some fun contrast here. I'm just going to lean into that, okay? So I'm going to let the bottom one dry. So that's kind of a different style poppy. Now see how this looks like it's already multi-layered? And this one looks like it has different flowers to it, different petals. Um, we're going to add some more layering with soft pink to this one here. If you wanted to add any more soft layering to this top one, you can. I am pretty happy with I am pretty happy with um welcome Debbie. All right, I'm just gonna mute Debbie. There we go. I'm pretty happy with this flower here, but I am gonna come and do this one now, though. This one is pretty dry, so I'm gonna do another layer. And again, you can use whatever brush you'd like. This bigger brush is actually working pretty well for me. I will switch to a smaller brush in a minute, but I'm gonna do another layer of soft pink petals to bring the more life to this one. It's going to add more dimension. So wherever I have the white space, I'm just going to come in and add another petal right on top. Like I'm painting another petal right in this space. And look at that. Isn't that so pretty? What it's already done. See how it's nice and light and it layered right on top. I'm going to grab a little bit more. I'm going to do another petal. I'm going to grab and layer another petal right in this space, right in between these. So you're going to see the details behind, and it's really going to start to bring this to life. Now you can play with making the edges nice, and you go into this nice and softly. And we're going to add more pigment, again, to the inner areas. Isn't that beautiful? I'm going to do the same thing over here. And again, you can be playful with the shapes of these petals. A nice soft pink. You can add a little extra flutter, but you can see how that's all layering in so nicely. And then when you want to add a little bit more, you can add a little bit more pigment to the center. And I'm just going to see what happens. I'm going to make sure there's enough water for it to spread. And I'm going to add a little more pigment. Once I have all those petals in, I'm going to use a little bit of this, just do a little bit of dotting and touching. So there's more pigment and flow in the middle. So you're going to have these fluttery flowers. And this is just such a fun experiment. If anybody's new to painting flowers with these soft layers, art is always about experimenting. Sometimes artists know what they're doing and sometimes they don't. And they love to admit that. And I'm one of those people. And it's so important just to be open-minded to the process and always try new things. So you can see how this beautiful flower has just, come to life. If you need to like add another petal or two to continue to, add dimension, feel free to continue to do that. Like if some of these need to be a little darker, you can use the tip of the brush to continue to just add some more softening or add some more like texture. It's absolutely up to you on how much or how little you may want to add. So isn't that fun how that happened? And I have some of the dark edges here. I'm going to shift those around a little bit. There's some of this dark pigment. You can use the tip of your brush and move the pigment around with watercolor. So use your eye. You get to make those choices. Okay. But how fun is that? A lot of different colors. I may even want to go darker pigments than that, right? So you always start lighter, and I'm going to go a little darker. So with watercolor, you can make these choices. I'm going to go a little darker, a little bit more pigment. will draw more contrast and color to the middle. Ooh, it's gonna get darker. I just added some more. So have fun with this, right? I love talking through and experimenting with you all in these videos so you can see what is possible. Now, you can see some of the color has spread to the top. It's because this is not taped down. With watercolor, it's always good to tape down. I'm just going to dab my paper towel to keep this edge nice and soft. See how I have the contrast in the middle? That's important to me. And you can always let this dry and come back to it. That's absolutely fine. And then I'm going to come in. I have like a pink going. I want to go back to more a little bit of a red. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of red and mix it in with my pink. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to come in and I'm just going to do a little bit more layering with a darker color for a little bit more pigment. Now, if you like the way your shapes look now, that's fine, but I may come in, again, I'm going to let that one dry. I may come in and just do another layer of petals. If it's not entirely dry, it's not going to stick. So I'm going to give this another minute, but I like the color that's come in on the bottom here. So sometimes you have to let something dry again more thoroughly. So I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to resist from touching it. It's very difficult. So while our flowers are drying, I'm going to be really intentional to just not touch it for a minute, which is very hard. I can do green stems on some of my flowers. I'm just going to mix a green, but if you're still working and doing your own thing, take your time. I'm going to bring some water to my palette. Now my water looks like pink lemonade right now, and that's okay. Sometimes artists will have two water glasses in front of them for watercolor classes. They may have a clean water glass to grab clean water to mix new colors, and then have a second water glass to use for cleaning brushes. I'm just going to grab a green, find a green color of choice. I'm doing kind of a hunter green. I'm going to try to go a little darker mid-tone for these stems. And I'm just going to do a single line down. And I will go darker than this. And if this flower is wet, don't go near that one. But this one's dry up here. So I'm going to do a nice line because it will, if you touch that green anywhere near the wet pink, it will flood that region. But while that is drying, I can come in and just play with other areas. You can add in a little bit of green. So artists will always bop around from one area to another. While one area is drying, they'll do another detail somewhere else. So I want you to follow your own gut, your own reactions, your own needs for today's class. And then I'm just going to do a couple of other small leaves here. You can play with bringing in a little bit of secondary green just for extra contrast. When you add in a darker green or a secondary coat, it just adds more shading to the element. And I'm doing all wet paint on a dry canvas today. You could do wet canvas with wet paint. That just helps things move around in a different way. So there's tons of ways to play with some of these details. But I'm just going to drop in on my stems where it's still wet a little bit of darker or a second coat of this green just to see what the spread looks like, how it flows from one to another. And I'm just doing very simple poppies today. I can always make this a little wider here. I started by keeping it very narrow. It's better to start narrow because then you can kind of control the stem size a little bit better because I can always make it a little bit bigger, which is what I'm doing right now. And then you can fill it in any way you wish. This one's wet down here, so I am staying, actually it's kind of dry down here now. Don't ever put another color near, and this one's gonna kind of come right here. It will bleed from one area to another. And then this one's gonna come this way. So these are just fun, beautiful little poppies. This is just a fun example that we're doing today. I hope everyone's having fun. If you are watching this, you can check out our recording later if you'd like to do this on your own. We'd love to see how they come out. If you have any questions about this video today, please let me know. You can use the chat either in our Patreon space or on our live YouTube. And I'm just going to touch in a little bit of some darker colors. Isn't that fun? I'm going to actually make a little bit of a darker green just to show you what this looks like with a little bit of a darker color flooded in. I'm going to make sure that these are totally wet. See how I flooded in a little bit of a darker color? Super fun. I'm going to do a little more here. I'm just going to touch in, especially towards the bottom of the flower. It's a little darker here. Ooh, look at that. Isn't that fun? I'm not going to touch that. I'm going to do my best anyways. And maybe on the underside of the leaf. On the underside of these objects is where there's shaded areas, and that's where you can always add in a little bit of this darker color. And if there's too much, you can blot it up. That one up there came out really cool. This one's kind of spread down, so guess what? I can just use the corner of my paper towel and just blot it up to pick up some of that paint pigment. Isn't that neat? Look at that. And by using the corner of a paper towel, I was able to bring some of that dimension back to the base of that flower. Isn't that neat? So just take your time. I'm letting this dry, and then I can make more choices about what else I want to add and where. If I want to add more softer pink fluffy petals behind this to add more layering, I can. If I want to add more petals and make the scene more full, I could do that. So possibilities are really endless, especially poppies have so many beautiful layers. So if I look at this one, I see several beautiful soft and dark layers, which I really love. And I love the angle of this. It has those darker pinks down here on the bottom side. And then this one's just so soft and dainty. We only did kind of one pass at that. And this is the example that we used where we did a pencil sketch. Now I do see my pencil sketch through this flower, which this is all for demonstration purposes, so it's all good. I am gonna bring down this green stem over here as well. I might just bring this over here and just give this a secondary stem because I forgot to bring this down before. So there, I brought that down a little bit there. So this is your painting. You can do as much or as little as you wish. If you want to add in more grass or more flowers, this is a great time for that. So you can think about the overall composition. If you want to keep it simple with just a couple flowers, you could absolutely just keep it simple. I will do a little more layering, soft pink layering only on this one. And once this flower is done for me, I will be adding the black poppy detail, the middle detail inside of this, but I'm going to wait till this flower is perfect to me. And then I can look around to see if there's anything else I may want to add. I may do a little bit more green, and I'll show you a demonstration. I'm going to add a little bit more grass-like detail. I think I'm going to keep these poppies as my focal poppies, but I'm going to add some green variation behind them, which is going to be really fun. And I'm going to do all light green first. So if you want to do this with me, you can. If you don't want to, that's okay too. I do have a smaller size brush, and I'm going to do the water on water technique. So the wet on wet. So I have a wet brush with no color, and I'm going to do some long, skinny grass blades going up. Now, if I wanted to have that wet color and then come in, and I want to stay away from pink, and there's a little pink wet right here, so I'm going to do my best to go around this guy. I'm going to add some soft grass, and I could even just do a light green. That would be fine. I'm just going to add some soft wavy grass. This is just what I'm inspired to do today in the distance. I'm going to keep the flowers, the 3 flowers as my focal piece. But I'm going to go behind all of these. And I'm just going to add some really soft detail. Now I'm picking from this green I have right here, and you can water this down by adding in more. And I'm being really patient. I'm letting all the pink flowers dry. They're all dry except this one. It's a little wet on top. So I can come over here and just do some really soft, and I can do some shorter blades, and I can do some longer blades. But I'm really just turning this into a little bit of a garden scene. But as you can see, my composition is still purely focused on these flowers. So I'm doing this to not take away from the flowers. I'm doing this to draw our eye to them as the main subject, which is kind of fun. And it's softening the background. The white can be kind of harsh. So I'm using just a small brush, and these are fairly thin grass blades. And I'm just doing really soft and thin elements. So I'm going a little crazy with the grass, long, skinny grass blades. Maybe these are more poppies in the background, right? But this is your choice. As an artist, you have choices in every single one of our classes to add grass or not add grass, right? Everyone has different ideas on what they want to do. And you may not have an idea. You may just show up and just be playful. And I applaud you for that. Always show up and be playful in these classes. I will be here to encourage you. I'll be here to give you ideas and support along the way. I'm doing long, skinny grass blades behind my poppies. I'm adding depth and dimension to this. If you're not already following my channel, I encourage you to hit the like button. We are streaming live on YouTube right now, which is so fun. We don't always do that. So thank you all for being here if you're watching. Our Patreon members have access to these live classes traditionally. So I want to thank all of our Patreon members that are here today watching and hanging out with us. Some of you may be watching, some of you may be painting with us. Anything goes. But I'm having fun just adding some long, skinny grass blades. Again, these are not distracting to our flowers. They are just adding a little bit of depth and dimension to our background. And it really allows the flowers to jump out on the page. And I made a decision before I did the grass that I was actually happy with the number of flowers. So I was very intentional of just keeping these 3 flowers today because you can see I'm filling in the white space, right? If I was going to add other flowers with watercolor, you always start from the foreground and you work your way to the background. So the foreground for me are these flowers. Now I'm filling in the background. So that might make sense now, right? So a little bit of water, a little bit of this paint, and I'm just adding in this really soft grass-like detail. I'm just giving my hand a little bit of a wiggle as I go. Isn't that fun? Now you could get really crazy here. You could add in another color green. So let me just experiment with you all today. There is like a Kelly green here. There's a more of a vibrant green. Let's see what this color will do. This is more of like a lime green. I'm just gonna mix it right in. It's really fun, and I'll probably add a darker green too. It's fun to add different colored grass blades to your picture. You could also just go darker too. I'm gonna add a few of these just to see if I like this or not. And if you don't like this, you don't have to, but I love experimenting and just trying it out. It's very light. I'll just probably add a few of these, but then I'll go a little bit more of a darker contrast. I don't want to take away from the flowers too much, but adding in kind of a fun nether element. It's brightening it up, which is kind of fun. So these are your choices you can make as an artist of adding in these grass-like elements. The other interesting thing with a painting like this is you could do a soft water wash of a green on top of all of this and around your flowers to really add some green, some more of a dense green feel. So a consideration is I am adding right now texture. And if I wanted to add in some overlying green around my flowers, and even maybe blue at the top coming down into the green, that could build the whole background from a color perspective. But that's a choice you get to make as an artist, right? So if you like the lighter background, you could keep it. But if you wanted to really bring in nature a little more to this painting, you could always bring in a green wash around your flowers and then maybe a blue down mixing with the green in this area. That could be really pretty, right? So those are just fun things to think about, how much time you want to spend. But I love that we're adding a little bit of texture here. I may be a little bold and try some of that wash. We'll see. I may do some darker, I don't want to do too much, but I may add a little more darker green contrast. The flowers are, the stems look pretty good, but I might add a little bit more darker green contrast to some of these stems. Just going to mix a little bit of a darker green here. I have a little bit of a Kelly green and I have a little bit of like this might be darker. There we go. So that's a little bit of a darker green right there. I may just add a little bit of water on my brush. And in certain places, I can just add in a little bit of a darker color of the green, especially like here at the bottom of the flower. I like that contrast. So you can be intentional of where you want to add in some of those details. See that contrast I added right there? I'm going to do the same thing here. And if you need a little water to move things around or to blot something up, you can do that. So I'm just adding in a little tiny bit more of the darker green contrast to my stem. Then I'm going to go back to this main flower and do a little bit more work here. But we are doing a watercolor tutorial today. This is perfect for all ages. This will be posted in our YouTube channel. We are doing a YouTube live right now, but this will be available for everyone after if you want to come back and reference. So be sure to follow and like the YouTube page and our Patreon space if you would like access to the live classes in the future, but also are enjoying this today. So I want to thank everyone for being here. We have lots of folks that are joining us today. Miss Debbie and Miss Sharon, and there's lots of other folks that are popping in. So thank you guys so much for being here and saying hey. There is a live chat on our YouTube stream. So if you have any questions, use our live chat on our YouTube stream or our Patreon space. All right. And I'm just going to check in on our chat. I think we're doing good. Oh, Debbie, thank you, Debbie. You're so sweet. Isn't it soft and dreamy? I know. It's such a, we try to do uplifting things this time of year uh, to cover up any other muck that may be happening in our lives or difficult things. So we try to do bright and uplifting things to add a little bit of extra perk where we may need it. So I love my stems. I'm going to leave my stems the way they are. I'm also going to add a little bit more of another layer of light pink to this flower. I feel like it needs a little bit more depth and dimension. So I'm just going to grab a little, and it could be like a soft red, but I'm going to add in another layer. So this is our inspiration. And maybe it's just adding in, I don't know. I'm just going to be really playful here. These poppy leaves are pretty big, so I'm going to use water. And I'm just going to add in a little bit more dimension. I don't know what's going to come from this, but I'm just going to add in a little bit more. And for me, it's the leaf-like. It's the leaf shape that I really want to come out. I want to see more of these rounded leaf shapes because poppies have so much personality and pizzazz. And I just want to make sure I see that. And by doing single soft layers, you'll start to see some of these edges really come to life. Maybe it's even, making some of these a little bit more unnatural. So like adding in a little bit of a raw edge. I think maybe that's what I want to add in is a little bit more of a raw edge on some of these. Sometimes we unintentionally make our flowers look perfect where they really need to look not so perfect. So if I add in a little bit of a jagged edge here, what that would do. Right? So we can play with our edging. I'm using a really soft pink, so I'm not trying to mess up what I've already created, but I really just want to add in a little bit more personality to the edges. And as it dries, it will hold that nice solid line and edging that I'm looking for. So you can play with that. Everybody's going to see and do different things here. I may play with a little more contrast in some areas. So again, if you want things to spread, I'm going to add a little bit more red and a little more water here just to see kind of what happens. But I do want to try to follow some of these poppy leaf shapes so it looks as normal as possible. So these poppy leaves are really large and soft. So I'm going to try to follow these leaf shapes so it holds. There we go. And that makes it look like the poppy, right? When you have those nice bold rounded petal shapes. So I'm kind of looking at the shapes that I've added, and I'm kind of staying within those lines to hold those round forms. Because I do want the middle of this flower to be darker. That is the intent. And it's starting to happen. And you can see how my layers are really adding up on one another. That is what I'm going for. I want to see the layers. I want it to get a little darker. You can also use your finger to blend if things start to get out of control. Keep those darker elements towards the middle. You can bring that pigment back in if you need to. You can see I'm kind of moving it in and then it's going to spread its way back out, which is fine, but I can kind of bring it in and tame it in a little bit. It's water, it's going to flow, right? And we're going to put it, and I can use my finger to kind of dot in the middle to be like, stay here, friends, right? But see how much more like lacy the edges look here? And I'll bring it closer in just a minute. But we're going to add a nice dark middle to this, but I want that dark contrast to be there. You can see there. I want it to be a little darker, and I may do it a little more intentionally in some areas, maybe on the edges here, the edges of these poppies. So this is your artwork. You do as much or as little as you wish. I want to thank everybody for being here. If you're not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, subscribe. I have lots of beautiful tutorials for acrylics and watercolors, perfect for all ages. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you're having a great time. If you're watching, you can watch. If you want to paint, you can paint. We always welcome everyone as you are to come and join us. Okay, I'm going to let that set. I think that's good for right now. This may need a little bit, some areas you think you may need a little more color. You can make choices on where it's a little too light. That's why we start light, because we can always make things darker. Always, always. So I'm going to let that dry. And then this one I'm happy with. I'm not going to touch that. I may do a couple of thin layers on top just to add another layer of dimension. Now that I'm looking at it, I'm very happy with it though, but I might add like another couple of small tier layers here in the front. Again, a light pink. So it just adds another layer here. And this is really beautiful. Look at that. Just a soft tier layer. Gives me a nice new edge. So pretty. And I can do the same thing here. I can add just another soft tier layer. And just with a little water on my brush, I can just blend it in ever so gently. But I love seeing those layers. It's so pretty. And this is the patience of watercolor. Once you let something dry, you can come in and you can add a little bit more. You just have to let it kind of do its thing and give it time. And I'm moving some of this pigment down. So what a beautiful layering effect that is giving. Isn't that gorgeous? Just a second layering effect here. I kept those top layers nice and soft. And I'm just doing another thin, beautiful layer on top. And if something goes on too dark, I can always eliminate that. I can use my paper towel. Like that's a little dark right there. So I can just take the corner of my paper towel and just blot that up ever so gently. It's interesting how a simple pool of water with watercolor. Thank you all so much for liking this video. You guys are so sweet. Isn't that gorgeous? Like how that just happened. I could do the same thing with this if I wanted to add a little bit more of a layering in the front. I could do that. But I love how this came out. It came out so beautifully. I could tuck in even another layer, a thin layer in between if I wanted to. And I could do it in between these two petals here. Watch this. I'm going to go gently around. I'm not going to touch the layer I just did, but I could just tuck in a beautiful, soft, like another layer in this space. Just show you. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I'm just showing you the possibilities of adding in a little bit more. Isn't that beautiful? And I'm giving a little space in between each of these layers. And this takes a little just practice and more so patience. Watercolor is a beautiful thing. There are so many different ways to practice it, but letting it dry. So I added just kind of another tucked in layer right there. And then if I wanted to make more of a clean edge on some of these petals, I could just let this dry entirely and then just do another ridge line here on the dry paper so my new line would stand out. So I'm going to leave that flower. It came out beautifully. If I wanted to come up here and add in another thin layered flower, I could do that on one of my top flowers up here. It's like if I wanted to add in another little bit of a wider petal here, I could. I could even have another sprawling petal kind of come out off the side if I wanted to. And then I can just fill this in. This layer will show on top of what I've already done. And if I wanted to kind of come off the edge a little bit, I could come off the edge a little bit, like there's another flower petal here. Again, I want the edges of these petals to be lighter and I want the bottoms to be a little darker. So you can push any pigment down to the bottom. See how it brought my eye back down there? And that extra dimension is just so pretty. So these classes are always about experimenting. I want to thank everybody so much for joining. Our classes are usually about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Today we've only been painting for an hour. So if you're watching, welcome to our class. I hope you're having fun. If you are painting with us, terrific. I am going to add a little bit more of the darker contrast down here to the bottom of this. I can move it around with my brush. It just brings the eye down a little bit of that darker pigment. Isn't that beautiful? So this is watercolors. We're just playing with layering with different watercolor types. Now we've talked about a lot of different items. So I was very intentional to just do these two flowers today. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I was very intentional to just do these three flowers today. If you wanted to do more with watercolor, you always start in the foreground and you work your way to the background. Now the foreground for me are these three flowers in itself, and the stems are also attached to these flowers. Now, as a mid-ground item, I did some fun of this like long skinny grass. And then if we wanted to do like a wash in the full background, I always love experimenting in these classes. So I think I'm going to do a wash just to show you what it looks like. Now I'm going to stay away from my flowers. I promise that can be really scary, right? So with our watercolor painting today, I'm going to do a really pretty wash on top of all of the green. And I actually may even do a blue on top fading into the green, which will be really pretty, kind of like a grass to a sky kind of scene. So I'm going to do, since this is all dry for the most part, I'm going to do some water on my palette like this. And I'm going to take a little bit of this green and I'm just going to do, actually, I might grab a little bit of, I have like an olive green here. I'm just going to see what color this gives me. I might just put it in here. That's kind of interesting. You can always do a test too. So if I do a test on my paper, you can always do, I have a piece of watercolor paper to do a test too. So that's kind of it's not a very nice green color. So I may not use that. But what about this color as a water wash? Maybe. Let's see what other colors we could experiment with. What about this one? That's a little bit better. It's kind of a minty color. I could go minty or I could go grass green. So it's okay to experiment. What about a lime color? No, I think I want to go more subtle. I could also do a bluish green color as well. So I'm going to do a bluish green kind of subtle color, more on the green side. So I'm going to mix a color I like first. And subtle means, for me, just going to find the color and I'll do a test. So it's always good to make the pigment first. I'm going to do a water wash. If you are still working on your painting, continue to work on your painting. That is too vibrant. I'm going to add, I have a little bit of white here. I'm just going to add a little bit of white to kind of dull down the color a little bit. All right. And I want to make enough of this, so I'm going to add some water to this in this big area. So it's watery enough. I don't want it to cover up the detail like entirely, so I want to go fairly light. I'm also making enough of this so I don't run out of it. It's very important. Okay, that should be enough. And I'm just doing this as a subtle color. And then I have it on my brush, and I'm just going to do some smooth horizontal brush strokes. And we're going to see how this changes. I'm being really subtle. I'm staying away from my flowers. I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. So you can see the color starting to change. I'm going to be a little bit careful, and I'm just going to go around. I'm doing some left, right brush strokes. I'm making sure everything I'm touching is dry. If it's not dry, it's going to smudge it. This is all dry. See how the color is just shifting. See how it's drawing your eye to the flowers more, even on this bottom part. I love experimenting with these classes. So you can see there's so many different ways of painting watercolors and applying color, especially if you don't really know where you're going. Today's class, literally flying by the seat of my pants. And that is so much fun to demonstrate because it encourages you just to show up as you are. You don't need to have a full crazy plan to join an art class. So I love making these classes really approachable for you to show up with just the inspiration to paint. And I'm going totally around these pink flowers. And I'm dancing my brush around these pink flowers. Isn't that fun? But look at the difference already with just a little bit of green. I can see the difference. I can see the difference and I love it. It's just enough to draw my eye even deeper to the composition and why we're here. And we're here for these beautiful poppies. They're so feathery and dainty and just uplifting. Everything I'm painting over is totally dry. So if you're not ready to try this, and again, more water, the softer this background color will be. But look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? I'm going to continue, and I'm doing wet paint on my brush on a dry canvas. I didn't apply water first. I didn't want it to do any additional like smudging. So I'm just really careful, but everything I'm touching is dry. So it's not going to smudge any of the stems. It's not going to smudge any of the other areas. Now I am going to bring in a little bit of blue in a minute, which is going to be really fun. And I'll do a little bit of fun blending with the blue for my sky. I'm going to do blue kind of at the top, kind of blending down into the green, just because I can. And I'm going to dance around my little fluttery flowers and go all the way off the side of the page. And this just really, it's emphasizing the scene. It really warmed things up for me. Made it feel a little more cozy, a little more natural versus just the white background. But again, with watercolor, we always start in the background and we work our way to the foreground. So go around your objects. I just painted over my flower by accident. Whoopsie. I'm painting around things. But if anyone's new here, my name is Megan. I'm so glad you're with us. Up here at the top, I'll scoot this down. I did a really soft green water wash around my flowers on top of the stems. I'm going to do a water wash on top. I'm painting water on the top up here. And I'm going to bring in kind of a fun blue blend to just blend in a little bit of sky towards the top. If you don't want to do blue, you don't have to. You could just do green. But I'm going to do a little bit of a blue blending down just because I can, because it sounds like fun. It could even be a bluish green color, which I'm going to mix on my plate. So we have a lot of folks joining on our YouTube space. We have folks joining on our Patreon space. I want to thank everyone for being here. If you have any questions, feel free to use those chat windows. I'm going to use a little bit of blue here, a little bit of blue. And what I can do is I can just gently apply the blue to the top and I can bring it down into the green area. Now this is so subtle and I love being subtle because it's just, you don't have to go crazy. And if I don't like the blue, I can just blend in a little bit of green, but I'm going very light with colors just to shift it and blend it down. And it's exactly what I wanted, just really soft and simple. Because the top isn't a primary focus, right? I'm here too, and I'll bring maybe a little bit of the green up. I want to keep the focus on the flowers. So I don't need any crazy detail up there. I'm just going to dance around the flowers. And if you see any brush strokes, just use water to kind of wash out those brush strokes. I'm seeing a little bit of the green brush strokes come through. I'm just going to use my water to blend those out. So plain water on your brush just to blend out any brush strokes that may be coming through. It's no problem. And just play with these steps. I'm not going to do too much more, but I just wanted to show you how I just had a kind of soft, subtle ending towards the top. I may bring in just a little bit more, but I'm not going to go too crazy here. But today's class was really just a fun way of experimenting with poppies. Once this poppy here is dry, we're going to add a little bit of black detail to the center of that poppy. All the other poppies are kind of close, like this one's facing up and this one's facing over, but this one is black. So I will just get a small brush and just prepare a little bit of a dark blue or a dark purple or a black, whatever color you want to use. I'm going to prepare that on my plate. And it's going to be fairly dark in color. You could make it a brownish tone with black. It's totally up to you. I'm mixing just like a little brown and black together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start small with the center. And again, my poppy is totally dry. I'm going to do, and I'll zoom this down a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. I'm doing a center on the poppy right here. And I'm just going to do, I'm going to use little dots to just kind of find the center of where I want the middle to be. Kind of like a dotted ring. And then I did wet, and then I'm just going to put in a little bit of water in the middle. And I'm just going to like let it sit for a second. Now, if it's too much water, I can obviously always dab a little bit of it up, which is fine. And then I can say, do I want to make the middle of this bigger? So it's always better to start small, but I added some texture, which was good. But then I can kind of just make it a little bit bigger by just expanding my circle just a little bit. And I'm just going to let it dry. Now it may start to spread on you, so you just have to be really intentional. I'm going to keep it kind of within. And I didn't go, I'm going to manage it here. You could also use, I'm just using the tip of the brush to add a little bit more pigment in at a time, and I'm going to let it dry. I'm going to try to add a little texture on the outside. A little dot, a little prick, little tiny touches. If you have too much water pulling up in areas, just use the corner of your paper towel to just reshape your poppy, the middle of the poppy. And if you need it to just have a minute and dry, that's fine. I may even add more contrast around the center of this poppy after. Now, if you want to use a whole lot less water, you could use a darker pigment with less water. So I'm adding a darker pigment and I'm just showing you what's happening with a darker pigment and less water. I'm just doing little tiny dots. So I kind of had a softer background first. Again, start with lighter colors, work your way back. And I'm adding little tiny dots. I probably am going to add a little more darker contrast of the red or the pink. Once this black dries, I think that'd be a really beautiful touch. So you kind of have to, again, patience with watercolors, but acknowledge the things that are important to you based on the composition. So I'm bringing in a tiny bit of the black contrast, but I'm going to be patient and let that dry because I know I can do more to it, but I don't want to overdo it, right? It's fairly center. It's fairly circular, but it's not perfect, which is fine, but it looks textured. So I have a base undercoat of design. Then I have a little bit of the texture on top of the poppy center. And I'm going to let that dry. I am not going to touch it. I may add a little bit more dark green contrast to some of the stems. So as an artist, you're going to make choices about how much time you spend on certain areas. I feel like my poppies could use a little bit more dark green contrast than what I have right now. So I'm just mixing a darker green and I'm going to make this a little watery. So let's see here. There's that. And then this is a wet brush and I'll zoom out while my black dries. I'm going to leave that alone for a minute, the middle of that poppy. I'm just going to zoom out. Oops. But welcome. If anyone's new here, it's so great to have you. We love meeting new folks in our classes. And for the folks that are on our Zoom and Patreon, we're so glad you're here with us. You ladies are awesome. All right. I have a wet brush with a dry canvas. So I'm just gonna take a minute and add a little bit of water to where I want to add a little more contrast. So maybe it's right here on the underside. I didn't add enough before. I didn't add that contrast before. I wanted to add more, a little bit more. And maybe I'll add a little bit of a line down the side. And then once I have my water on, I can just touch this darker contrasting color and it will just flow down where I put my water. Isn't that fun? So you can do your water on water technique by doing apply your water first on where you want your darker colors to go. And then it will flow and shift for you. So let's do that over here. And you touch your darker contrast in, and then it will flow where you want it to flow. And if you don't like it, you can just wipe it up really quick, but it's kind of a fun thing to try. If it doesn't show up the way you like it, you can just wipe it up really quick, blot it, don't smudge it. I want it to look a little natural, so some of my leaves are really, my stems are pretty small, so I have only so many choices here. But that's beautiful contrast. I'm going to do the same thing for up here. I'm going to do a little bit of water first. I just want my stems to be a little bit darker, my leaves to be a little bit darker. For me, I'll just kind of help tie together the whole composition, but I'm doing a water brush stroke first, and then I'm going to touch in and apply the darker color next. So I did my water brush strokes, and I'm letting the center of that other poppy dry. I'm going to come back to that. If anyone's new here, so happy to have you. My name is Megan. I'm based in New England. I lead painting tutorials and art classes for all ages and all abilities. I'm so glad everyone's joining us. So there's just a little bit of extra contrast. And for me, I really like that. It really stands out against the background. I can see and appreciate all of my beautiful layers on the watercolors. But I'm going to zoom down and once this black is dry right here, I'm going to come in and add in a little bit more of the darker poppy rich color. I really want some of these poppies to pop out a little bit more. And I'm a really reserved watercolor artist, just to be totally transparent. Um, I have been doing watercolors a lot less than acrylics, but it's really important to just be brave and to try new things. And I love just being with you all and doing this experience together. It's really quite fun. But for me, I visually know what I want more of. And in this case, I want more of the red of the poppy down the center. These are very pink and fluffy. I want them to be a little bit more red in contrast. So I'm just going to add in, I'm going to follow the bottom of these flowers. I'm going to stay away from my black if I can. And I'm going to add a little water. And you can see it's already darkening, but I'm going to add in a little bit of red and let it just flow. There we go. So I'm going to do a water. I see I'm staying away from my black just in case if it's still wet. And I'm just adding in a little bit of water and then a little red to just let this kind of flow and just see what happens. See that beautiful contrast it just created? I'm going to do it again over here. A little bit, I'm following these rounded petals of my poppy. I'm kind of doing water about halfway up and then bringing in this red. See how that's a beautiful complement to what I've already started. And this is such a great example of how your art can evolve with just a little patience. Look at that. Isn't that so cool? I knew I wanted a little more. A little water. I'm staying away from my black because I can always go back near there if I want to. And I'm bringing the water about halfway up this petal. I'm going to bring in that red contrast that I have on my plate that I'm like almost out of of my paint pigment. Look at that. Isn't that fun? So if you paint something you don't like, you can wipe it up quickly. If you have a little bit too much of this or that, this I'm just going to kind of blend in here so it all kind of just flows naturally. Maybe use your finger to kind of smudge it in. Lean back in your chair. I want to keep these edges nice and soft, right? That was a really important thing for me. So you have to play with how you blend these colors into one another. It is so tricky and it's all practice. And I am not a pro. I'm going to admit that right now. But it's fun to be playful and see how it happens all together. But use your eye. Try to make some of those choices. It's very empowering to just try to make some of those choices on your own and know that you can do it. Try to keep that dark. You can pull some of the pigment back into the middle, and that will kind of flow out again. But isn't that fun and how that a little bit of that extra color happened in that space? Now, I really like what happened there. I actually want to add that same red down here to the bottom of this other flower because I want that same beautiful brightness to show through. And I'm going to use the same technique. So I have a little bit more of that red right here. I'll move this up so everybody can see it. I'm going to do the water technique first and put the water where I want that red to come in. I'm going to do it right here. And I'm going to add in, oops, let me do the water first. I'm going to paint in this whole leaf area where I want that water to come in. And I want it to be darker down at the bottom. And I'm going to let it flow up. Look at this little bit of magic that I'm doing. Who would have thought I'm a magician, you guys? Again, a wet water brush. And I'm going to come in, I'm going to keep some of these petal-like shapes. And I'm going to put the darker color and let the darker color flow up into the leaves. You don't have to do a lot of it. It's totally up to you. And I'm doing this water on water technique so it can blend up into the other colors. See that? Isn't that beautiful? So pretty. And not gonna touch it. I'm gonna let it dry. So once you do something you like, give it a minute to let it do its thing and dry so you can just see, how it kind of forms. But look at that beautiful contrast that I've added. I have a little bit more of this paint. I'm going to just do a little bit of a touch over on this side. And I'm just going to touch it up on the bottom and I'm going to let it flow up on the top, flow to the top. Mm. And if it's too much, just use your finger and just blot up or your paper towel to blot up some of that color. But I'm going to let that dry. I really wanted those flowers to have a little bit more contrast and they came out so beautifully. I will add a little bit more red around that black. So I want that dark color to go right up, and you could even use like a darker red too. That's like a pinky red. I want there to be a nice contrast going right up against. Ooh, look at that. I have like a nice reddish purple color. I'm going to come in and just touch this. I don't know if that's too dark. It might be. I'm going to come right around. It might be too dark. Well, that's actually, it might help with the fade. We'll see. Ooh, that's interesting. I'm adding in a little bit of a darker red and it's kind of flowing out a little bit. And I'm going to keep an eye on it. If I don't like it, I can get rid of it, but I'm just doing a little bit of like a combo blend here. It might flow out and might be a nice transition. So I'm just experimenting a little bit. Yeah, so that looks great. So I took this darker red color and I came in, and I'll bring this a little closer so you can see it. And it started flowing. Now, one area spread a little easier than another. And this area down here didn't have as much water, so it didn't spread. But I just added a little water to the tip of my brush, and I'm encouraging it to blend in with that other color. Isn't that pretty? See, look at that contrast it gave in that transition from the dark center, which I'll make the dark middle a little bit big, a little darker with my black color here. Just a little bit. And I don't want it to blend. I don't want this black to spread, so I kind of have to be really careful. Don't do the black until the other part dries to stay away from those edges. But look at that. Isn't that a beautiful transition of color? I gotta be really careful. I'm just doing a tiny touch. And these dots are nice because it gives some of that texture we see on the inner sides of flowers. So that I really like. So once you see something you like as an artist, please just put your brush down. It's like the best thing, right? So this is like a beautiful, we did 2 or 3 layers of petals for this watercolor flower to come out like this. It's not perfect, but it was a lot of fun, right? So you always just kind of take everything, as it is. I'm really quite pleased with this lower flower here. I'll hold this up so you can see all these details. Isn't that gorgeous? So we did several tiers. We always started with the lighter colors in the background. We did some beautiful tiers. We came in and we added darker colors, layer upon layer, on top of our other ones. And then we did some soft green grass in the background. This was just a really fun, really great introductory watercolor class today. So what I'm going to do is, for anyone joining the YouTube Live, I want to thank you so much for being here. I hope you had a great time. If you have any questions, please let me know. My name is Megan. Be sure to follow my channel and like this video, give us a thumbs up, and also click the little bell to get alerts on our upcoming videos. But thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see you again in the future.